My name is Kathy Sherman, and I live in Santa Fe with my husband, Joe Sherman. I only have one child. Her name's Susanna. I was a dental hygienist, and when I got to be about 55 years old, I thought, well, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do when I can't do dental hygiene anymore? What will I do when I'm retired? And I thought, I think I want to be an artist so I can stay busy doing something productive at home and be happy. I was born in 1953 on Halloween, and I was born in St. Stephen, New Brunswick, even though I'm an American, because the hospital was closed at the time. My father was pure Italian. He was a first-generation American of Italian immigrants. Around 1910 they came. And my mother came from the rural part of Maine, near Eastport, Maine, and her family had been in this country since 1776. I'm a Mayflower descendant, and her family had served the country back in the Revolution and settled in eastern Maine, and my accent is early American accent. There were 6 children in my family. So my mother had 5 at first, all pretty close together. So I was the 4th child out of 6, and I had 2 older brothers and an older and younger sister, and then a baby brother. I was in the middle of a big family, and I looked up to my brothers and sister, and my parents were so occupied. My dad worked long hours in road construction. They built a lot of the roads in Maine, original roads to connect towns together. And my mother just was a basic, good housekeeper. And we got 3 meals a day, and we were in bed at the right time every night and had dinner at 5 o'clock every night. It was very cold in the winter, and it was very beautiful in the summer. So in the summer, we had wonderful summers. We actually moved to a lakeside camp in the summers when I was 2 years old, and I spent every summer on a lake, and we were swimming almost every day. We rode bicycles, we hiked mountains, we walked in the wilderness, we went out looking for wild animals. We did a lot of fun things all together as 4 kids, the 4 oldest. It was kind of cold in the winter. I must say, the house was 60 degrees, and it was hard in bed. We would have to get in bed, roll up in the blanket to get warm enough, and then huff and puff in the blanket to heat it up so that we could fall asleep. In that time period, 1960, the immigrants in this country were French, Italian, and Irish, and those are all Catholic countries. And so the Catholics opened schools in a lot of these small towns because there was prejudice against the Catholics at that time. And they opened their own schools, and we were really privileged to go to a nice school with, I had the sweetest nuns of all. My older siblings said they had some of the cranky ones, but I had sweet young nuns who were really beloved. So we'd have 1 teacher for 3 years, 3 classes. There were only 8 people in my class. After 8th grade in the Catholic school, we had to switch to public school, and that was challenging because in public school, it was our first exposure to non-Catholics, and it was noisy, and it was ill-behaved, and I really hated it. I really liked my elementary school, and I had a hard time adjusting to high school. But there were nice girls there too, and I got to know all the girls, and I always made a point of going out and getting to know everybody, making sure I knew everyone in my class. So I didn't like it, but I did a good job, and I was quite a good student, not great, but quite good. I didn't have any focus yet in my life of what I would do. So I just got through those teenage years. It was tough times. Vietnam War was going on, and it was very distracting to be a teenager. And the Vietnam War started when I was born and ended when I was in college. So my whole childhood was kind of shadowed by the Vietnam War and the reactions our parents had and the stress the country was under at that time. It was very hard, and our whole generation, a lot of the men were getting killed, people's brothers and cousins. It was just sad to know that every day when you open the newspaper, 168 troops were killed, 300 troops were killed. And I remember as a teenager reading that, so I didn't like those years too much. But I wanted to go to college. It was my life dream to go to college. So the minute I graduated high school, I took all my savings from babysitting and I bought a little red Volkswagen. And I drove off in my little red Volkswagen to the city where there was a university. And first I just worked the first year, and then I started college. Actually, I did the first 2 years of college and I didn't know what to major in. And the war was still going on and the recession was going on. It was just still hard times. So I went all the way to San Diego and I got a dental assisting degree. So after 2 years in San Diego, I didn't like the big city anymore. I wanted nature. And I really missed trees and the ocean and clouds and pretty things. So I went all the way back to Maine and kept working as a dental assistant. And then I realized I was never going to make much money and I really needed to go to college longer. So I applied for dental hygiene school and I got in. I couldn't believe it. I got in. So there was my opportunity. So I just stopped everything and did nothing but study, study, study for 2 years. I had to pay for college myself. I had to eat carrots and rice for 2 years. But those were fun times, you know. It was fun because you had something you really wanted in life. And I graduated in 1980. And then after that, I was a dental hygienist for 35 years, and I really enjoyed it. So I had a marriage, and I had a daughter I named Susanna Elizabeth, and she's the only child I had, and she was just wonderful. And when she went off to college, she wanted to be an American diplomat. And I thought, oh, good grief. Well, why can't she just be a doctor or something? So I had raised her to think that college and education was very important. She went off to a college in Virginia and then Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And she got a Master of Art in Arab Studies. And I thought, what is she thinking of? Why can't she be a dentist? But she knew what she wanted, and she went off to Egypt. It was the first time she had been out of the country. And then I was living alone, and she went off to Egypt, and I thought, well, I might as well go where I want to go. I read the weather report, and I looked at every state in the whole southern half of the United States, because I was so scared to leave that I thought, oh, what if I make a mistake? What if I waste a lot of money moving and it doesn't work? But I got the Albuquerque newspaper and read it, and I considered California, but it's too crowded, and Arizona was too hot, and Texas was too much cowboy, and Florida is too humid. And I thought, oh, then I'll have arthritis all the time. So then I discovered New Mexico, and I couldn't find anything wrong with it. So I read the paper for 6 months, and then I started making my plans, and I told my boss, in January, I'm going to move. So I spent 6 months packing up my house, putting everything in storage, renting the house, and then driving to Santa Fe. And when I got here, I drove up the road and I thought, oh my God, I don't know anybody. I'm 45 years old and I don't know anybody in the city and I'm arriving. So I did it, and I got temporary work right away. Within a week I had a job, and I was here only a short time when I met my husband. And so I've been married to Joe, who's a scientist, a physicist, and we've been married 17 years. I was a dental hygienist until 4 years ago when I was sick, and then things changed after that. I was working as a dental hygienist for Christine. She was so nice, and she was young, and I was the experienced person showing her, this is how you do it smoothly, and the patients like it this way, and I made sure every patient was happy. And then as more and more patients came, it went from 1 day to 2 days to 3 days, and sometimes they needed me on a 4th day, and I started getting very tired, and then I started getting bad headaches. And the headaches got so bad that after a while I just said, Christine, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this anymore. So she said, well, that's okay, Kathy. And I'd been going to the doctor for headaches, but we didn't really figure it out. I stopped working thinking that if I stopped working and got rid of the stress, my headaches would go away. Well, they didn't, they got worse. And I started falling down, and I was falling down every day. And so I went to the ear doctor, ear, nose, and throat, to have my balance checked and my hearing checked. And she said, Kathy, I think there's something wrong. So she said, you need to have an MRI. So I had an MRI, and what we found out is I had a huge cyst behind my left eye. A cyst is a good thing because it doesn't kill you. However, it was squeezing my brain to the right, and that's why I was falling down all the time. I visited the brain surgeons there, and it was all very scary, and for a whole year I was really quite sick. And in the 2nd year, I had to go back and have a second surgery to put a shunt in, which takes the pressure off your brain. And it was right about that time, after that, that Christine invited me to a Baha'i meeting. I would have gone a year earlier, except that when I read that you can't drink anything, I thought, oh, you mean I can't have wine with my husband at dinner? And believe it or not, that foolish mistake held me up for a year, or I would have been another year in advance. But it makes me realize that people all have preferences, and they're very nervous about religions in general. And then what happened was Christine just called me one day and said, Kathy, I'd like to take you out. I'll take you shopping. And we went to a store together, and she brought me home again. And that was the first time I'd been out of the house in a couple months. Next time she asked me out, she said, would you like to go to a prayer meeting with me? And I said, oh, absolutely, I'd go anywhere with her, because she's my peer. So she took me to the first prayer meeting, and my head was, I had such a headache, I had to lean back in the chair like that and just listen. And I listened to the prayers, and I loved the prayers. I thought they were beautiful. It was like poetry. And I grew up with poetry. I just loved English poetry. And as a Catholic, I'd never heard such beautiful prayers in my life. And then I went to a few more meetings with Christine, and then they invited me to their house, and we did book 1 together. My husband, Joe, he was very skeptical, and he just let me do it, hoping I would get over it quickly. And unfortunately, I got more and more interested the more I read. My husband was hoping I'd get over it and go back to church with him, and I went a few times, but I didn't enjoy it, and it didn't mean so much to me anymore. By the time I got to book 4, I could explain to my husband, I'm both Catholic and Baha'i, no problem. We both went to Catholic schools. He went all the way through high school, and I went to 8th grade. We'll never forget what God did for us and what the nuns and priests did for us. That means a lot to us. But now it's so nice to be part of a 200-year-old religion instead of a 2,000-year-old, and to have books and all kinds of wonderful writings by professional people who were around at that time. I'm just awestruck by it all. Joe, he started accepting it when I learned to have a kindly tongue all of the time. So it was me who needed to grow and change. And when I learned to be more patient and more thankful of all the things he does do for me, and when I stopped expecting him to be perfect, I expected my husband to be perfect, to be God. And then I realized he's not God, he's just another human being. And then we started talking about that both of us, we do 9 things right and then 1 thing wrong. And we have to forgive each other. And next day, same thing, 9 things right, 1 thing wrong. And we learn to not focus on the 1 thing wrong and to learn to approach it again and get over it. And we got to be really good friends again. So now he doesn't mind what I do. He gives me freedom to be who I need to be, as long as I'm happy. And because I'm happy, he's happier. My daughter was coming home just a year ago. A friend of mine had 2 children, ages 4 and 10, and I asked them in the summer, would you like to have art lessons? And they said, oh yes, we'd love to have art lessons. I started teaching those 2, and then at Christmas last year, my daughter Mira, who is 8 years old, she and my daughter Susanna and Ian and Sean, the family of 4, came home for Christmas in December. And so I said to Mira, would you like to have an art class and I'll invite other girls over? And she said, oh, I'd love that, Nana. So I organized it and set up 2 dates for it. And so I asked my Baha'i friends, do you have any girls who would like to do art? And I had 2 takers right away. Nadia and Sophia wanted to do art. And so it was lovely. So then when I took Baha'i Ruhi Book 3, I found out about teaching children the right way, and then I included a larger group of Baha'i children who I teach once a month. And so I have that group of 7 once a month, and then the group of, they became 6 girls. And they come every Saturday. And I hope to make a book that can be shared among other Baha'i teachers about how to teach real art lessons to children. So painting is a lot like our lives. You keep trying and you never give up. You just try to do better and make it more beautiful and see this beauty of the world all around us. There's so much God and so much beauty to be discovered that you have to find it for yourself and to share. So I'm teaching the children, you can fix everything and you get better every year. And that's what makes an artist a happy person. It doesn't matter what your past was. It doesn't matter at all. If your heart is searching, your answer will come. Like breeze, it will come. And some things take 10 years, but they're really worth it.